Ralph on for a moment? There he is. Hello. See,
Hello.
you're in the same triangle here. How are you? It's so good to see you, Ralph.
Fine. Yeah, well, I'm a little biased, but this book is about elevating conversations in the family. It all starts with conversations with these kids. They have enormous practical idealism, curiosity, and we allow these corporate hucksters, whether it's the junk food companies or the internet companies, to bypass parental guidance, direct market, and exploit their vulnerabilities of these kids. They're spending 5 to 6 hours a day with that iPhone connection, separated from their families and their communities in what's called virtual reality, now the metaverse. So this is a call for action directly to these tweens, because we know their moral authority once they understand what's going on in the world. And they start doing that at age 9, 10, 11, 12. And so the book has 54 different topics, all of which stimulate conversation. Like, you know how when kids talk about they're being smart, who's smart, they usually talk about test scores or grades. And Claire said, well, are you smart about protecting your own body's health? How about being smart about how these companies are exploiting you with bad products and violent programming? How about being smart? What's a smart voter? So she shows that there are a lot of ways of being smart. And she keeps expanding their frame of reference because they're into themselves. And the narcissism is exploited by the Facebooks and Instagrams and all the rest. So these are short conversation pieces. And I think that's the secret of the book, is that it starts with ways of showing these children how they can teach themselves, and no one can stop this process inside a family. And so the subjects are so different, and each one provokes, like talk about the peer group pressures, or they talk about learning to unlearn, like American history, a lot of myths you have to unlearn, or learning by doing, work in a garden, or work with people who have skills as a youngster, to learn from them. I think Claire found in her inquiries that kids don't even know what their parents really do at work. And that's a nice conversation. But what do you really do at work if you're a plumber or a lawyer or an electrician or a carpenter or a restaurateur? The quality of conversation, we know, can be very short, nasty, sycophanty, empty, and that's really shortchanging these youngsters. There's an old saying Claire has in the book. That is, if you have a low expectation of these children, they'll oblige you. But if you have a high expectation, they'll surprise you. And there's a section in the book about a 5th grade class in a low-income area in Chicago some years ago. And the teacher said to them, well, we're going to have a year's project. What do you want to pick as a project? And they all said in unison, our school, it's crumbling. It's falling apart. The desks are broken. We don't have a cafeteria worth anything. It's freezing in the winter. We want a new school. And so he said, okay. And he had them all develop little videos and of their own making. And they got press in Chicago, and it got to the aldermen, as it's called, the local government. And they didn't get a new school, but they were transferred to a better school. You see, that it was interesting to see the interaction of the moral authority of these children to the adults who felt either ashamed or guilty properly. You have all these skyscrapers and all this wealth in Chicago, and they can't provide decent physical schools and materials for these children. So,
and the author, Ralph, wrote a book. The teacher wrote a book called Spectacular Things Happen Along the Way.
Yeah, it's teaching in the cracks, he says, between the rigid curriculum. And I'm amazed how these kids, they really understand. Like, she has a section on what we own as a commons. We own the public lands, the public airways. The youngsters never learn that in college. They don't learn that. We didn't much learn it in law school. It's called the commons. The biggest wealth in our country is owned by the people. The huge mutual funds, the pension funds, the public lands, onshore, offshore. She even says, okay, as kids, do you know about wrongful injury? Of course they do. They know about bullying, car crashes. And they says, well, do you know about contracts? Well, what do you mean? Well, don't you click on? When you click on, you're tied up with these terms and conditions on your computer, on your iPhone. So she teaches them the fundamentals of torts and contracts. I mean, we're shortchanging these youngsters terribly because they're just marketing objects for exploitation. Put the junk food in them. Put the junk drink in them. Obesity, diabetes. This country is very cruel to children.
Well, this is, I'm thinking of this book, I'm likening it to Unsafe at Any Speed. It's like a sequel to Unsafe at Any Speed, really. It talks about, just as the safety issues were talked about and uncovered in the car industry, you're talking about uncovering safety issues with social media and the metaverse that you talked about, and the hucksters that you speak about that have abdicated, where parents have abdicated their responsibility as parents to these folks who their only interest is to try to sell stuff to children.
And bad stuff.
Bad stuff, absolutely. I mean, oftentimes it is, and too much stuff. That's the other part, is the over consumerism that plays into the hands, and that's the idea: is that sell, sell, sell.
I don't think a lot of adults, Andy, know how bad it really is. They're selling cosmetics to 6-year-old girls. They're selling war toys to 5-year-old boys. They're selling over medications. There's a section in the book on the beauty business, and we quote
Anita Roddick.
Anita Roddick, who I think you might have met. She started this cosmetic company, but it's just for moisturizers. She was the biggest critic of the cosmetic companies for their manipulation and their exploitation and making people feel bad because they can never reach the 1% of the most beautiful people, and desperate to buy a lot of bad stuff in cosmetics, which are often close to pharmaceuticals. Now they're so strong. So it's like Unsafe at Any Speed you mentioned. The really common thread is you raise the expectation level of these children so that they become more confident, self-resilient, more curious about the world beyond this tiny internet gulag, which all the benefits are touted by the companies. They don't talk about the dark side. And now the Federal Trade Commission, academic studies, the California law, Claire pointed out, it's starting now to say, look, you're really damaging these children. There are higher suicide rates, the narcissism, the nastiness, the anonymous comments that come over, huge pressures, commercially driven profit pressures on these kids. And this book is sort of a liberation manual,
Well, it's interesting because when people, and children in particular, feel a sense of control over their lives, they become happier, they become healthier, emotionally, physically. That's the part I think that oftentimes is missing, is that sense of power and sort of determination for your own life has such a huge impact. People don't get depressed when they're engaged. They're far less likely to have mental health issues. They're far less likely to be isolated and become pariahs in their community.
Yeah. Well, Claire has a great way to talk to them about their own bodies. She
Yeah.
animates their heart, liver, brain, kidneys. And they
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
to the child like, I have a kidney, and if you start drinking, it's going to really, it's going to hurt me and my friend the liver.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she
Exactly.
turns it upside down, so they internalize their concern because it's their body parts. You see.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's
Well,
all very compressed but not rushed. But the one
Yeah.
thing I like she emphasizes is the need for solitude. There's a section on the need for solitude. Our parents gave us solitude. They,
Yeah.
lie down, look at the stars on the lawn, or walk through the woods, listen to the whistling of the wind.
Yeah.
All this is, you don't see kids outside anymore. They're not playing on the sidewalks anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I want to say a very special thank you, Ralph, for joining us these few moments at the end. Ralph Nader, of course, consumer advocate, and what Unsafe at Any Speed is now 57 years old, right?
57 cars are safer,
57.
but there's more to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
Every time you get in your car.
Put a plug in for you, Andy. I've called Andy Democracy's restaurateur.
Thank you so much. I know.
He set up a restaurant and a bookstore, and a meeting place for civic activity.
Because I believe
How many do you have now?
I believe an informed citizenry is an effective one. Is much more patriotic, is much more able to withstand the ups and downs that sometimes we have to face in this country. So I always believe in America, and